ओम सर्वधर्म स्थापकस्त्वं सर्वधर्मस्वरूपकः आचार्याणां महाचार्यो Ramakrishnaaya te namaha. Today we have to start a new chapter, chapter 5th, from Sri Ramakrishna, the great master, as the spiritual teacher, first part. And the name of the chapter is The Mood of the Spiritual Teacher in Youth. The previous chapter dealt with a childhood incident, and it was called the first manifestation. And now this is regular manifestation. A regular manifestation of his Guru Bhav starts in his youth. It was told there also. And Guru Bhav becomes perfect after his Nirvikal Samadhi. That is later on. But this youth is just a start of sadhana. That he will tell later on. And a shloka is given in the beginning as usual. Naham prakashah sarvasya yogamaya samavruta mudhoyam navijanati mam ebhya param avyayam. Yogamaya samavruta. What is Yogamaya? Maya itself is called Yogamaya because it is made of three gunas. So when Sattva, Raja, Tama all are there, it is called Yogamaya. Anything made of these three gunas is called Yogamaya. Now Yogamaya samavruta. Avruta means covered. Samavruta, nicely covered or badly covered. Now, who is badly covered? Service. Naham prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavruta. So I am aham yogamaya samavruta. So that is Leela. When Ishvara becomes man, he covers himself by the three gunas. But his real nature is beyond. And in the beginning of Guru Bhav, we are told, Trivir Gunamayer Bhavair Ebi Sarvamidam Jagat Mohitam Nabi Janati Mam Ebhya Paramavayam. Same thing is stated in a different way. There it was, the main thing was that all the bhavas have come from me. That is not the main point here. That is the difference. But there also it was told that people are deluded by the bhavas. And they do not see me who am beyond this. So that much is common here also. The meaning is that when we look at avatar, we have to go deep. The meaning is that when we have to study an avatar, we have to go beyond the Maya covering which he has himself taken. If he does not take the Maya covering, he cannot make a man itself. To take a man form, he requires the three gunas. If he does not take the three gunas, how he will take the man form? And man form cannot be made from Shuddha Sattva. Thakur has given an example. If gold is absolutely pure, you cannot make anything out of it. You have to add some base element to make ornament or anything outside gold. 10% pure gold, you cannot mold it. It's very, malleable, pliable. It cannot retain the shape. So some dross element is mixed with it to make it a shape. So unless Rajagun, Tamogun are mixed with that Shuddha Sattva, you cannot make a man form. And that is Yogamaya Sambhavrita. But when one understands, when one goes near, when one analyzes, then we will find that he is beyond. And that is what Saradananda Swamiji is doing from the beginning. We have seen in the first chapter, Jatoi Nada Chadatala Padakuri, as much as it is moved and weighed and analyzed, we find mind is going towards infinity. So that very thing is repeating here, that when we are describing, don't go by the superficial description only. Analyze, find out, then you will find out. Naham prakasha sarvasya. Ordinarily, everybody, there are few people who do understand me because their vision is penetrative. Gita also tells that if you are punya karmana, you can understand Thakur. But if you are a papa karmana, you cannot understand. If you have asuri swabhav, you cannot understand unless you have divine qualities. So, the whole thing meaning is that we have to struggle and find out. Mudo. Nam prakasha sarvasya yogamaya samavruta. Mudo yam na abhijanati. Abhijanati. Knowing really, knowing fully. Mam ebhya param aware. I am beyond this, I am aware, unchanging reality that Muda does not understand. Okay, let us see now. It is not by mere wish that man becomes a spiritual teacher or a leader. Now we have started that I think I'll become a spiritual teacher. I'll become a leader. This wish is not at all enough. Now, very difficult to translate. गुरु और नेता হওয়া মানবের ইচ্ছাধীন নয়. It is not under man's ইচ্ছা. ইচ্ছা adhin নয়. That means it is a special quality. That is the meaning. Now let us see what he says. A special manifestation of the mood of the spiritual teacher in the master's life began on the day he engaged himself to perform the sacred daily worship of the Divine Mother at Dakshineshwar. Now what I had told in preface, you remember? We had discussed the English translation is wrong. Remember? From the day of his sadhana, the very first sentence was that. And translation is that after he completed his sadhana. There he had clearly stated we are talking of an incarnation, not of a man. Man struggles to become perfect, then perchance he becomes a guru. And here, now from childhood, etc., because he has got sometimes it, that is like uh, that pumpkin and gourd. Fruits first, flowers afterwards. But when the mind and body become ready, that is youth. When the mind and body become ready, and he is going to do sadhana, then Gurva comes more. So throughout Leela Prasanga, we'll see the time period of second volume and third and fourth volume is same. Second volume is Sadhava, and third and fourth volumes are Guruva. Time period is same. Now what is happening? Sadhana means he is consciously struggling to manifest his divinity. Then the Guruva comes out because he is Guru. He is Vishwaguru, and so when he is struggling to catch hold of the divinity in him, then it comes out. So here the description fully corroborates what we understood in the preface. That you read, Nashridhar, that print I had given you?
Yes.
And there I had quoted later on the 5th chapter. A special manifestation, special. That means suddenly something happens is different. But in a regular way, it is going to start now. A special manifestation of the mood of the spiritual teacher in the master's life began on the day he engaged himself to perform the sacred daily worship of the Divine Mother at the. He is starting to do puja. It was then the period of his sadhana, directly mentioned straight away. So, period of his sadhana, Guru was started. Special manifestation. He was in a state of divine madness on account of love of God. What is divine madness? What is madness? Then you understand divine madness. What is madness? Now the man's thinking is not like ours. That is what we call madness, isn't it? Why it happens? Due to excessive attachment on something. You should read a little about it. In the old Marathi textbook, there was a lesson, the mental hospital. And each person was behaving in its own way. When they entered, the visitors, one man came forward and showed them everything. And they thanked him and said, "Come with us out." "No, I am not allowed to go out." He had his own madness, though he could understand others' madness, but he had his own madness. What was his madness, you know? He is telling that I had told them, you spend so much for running a railway train. Why not keep a big magnet ball in front of the engine? It will pull the engine. But how the magnet will move? My engine is pushing it. That was his great invention. They put him in mental hospital. There was one lady. Her husband had disappeared, whether accident or something yet. Most probably he had died. But she is waiting for him. Have you seen my husband? Have you seen my husband? She will go on asking. And she cannot come out of it. A man is mad after railway trains. So somebody standing like this. He said, "Arey, signal down karo na, I want to go. Why are putting signal up?" Like that. One man said, "I put the seed in the soil, and same day 10 times I put water and 10 times I change the soil, but it has not yet grown." So understand madness. Now this is due to one-sided thinking, excessive attachment on something, and his thinking is not like ours. You cannot convince him. I will tell another fun. I myself experienced. One boy came to me when I was in Chandigarh. No, he went out. Marketing or just went out. And he saw some girl. And he thought she is trying to attract me. Then when he came back, some other girl was coming on a scooty. Same girl had changed her dress and is looking at me. And when he came back, one young boy, devotee, he was coming to the ashram, but his sister had never come. First time he brought his sister, and in the door itself, this boy proposed her and telling same girl. And then one girl was sitting in my office, and he is telling me it was this girl. How many different girls he made into one? And that devotee boy and his sister were shocked. Anyway, madness. Now tell me, what is divine madness? His consciousness is above our consciousness. So how can he act like us? We act as dictated by our consciousness, level of consciousness. Each person's thinking is different if you see. We take logic to be universal, but each person's logic also is different. So according to the state of the mind we behave, but then we take the common humanity like that we say. Now if the consciousness is totally different, if he is aware of one reality throughout or nearer to that, then how can his behavior be like ours? And he has explained that in that Bhav Samadhi chapter, that it is not below us, it is above us. So that is called divine madness. So when Thakur went into sadhana, he went by full force. And not only that, his consciousness started changing that day. And his consciousness was above us always. And from that, the Guru Bhava comes up. Because the consciousness tends to become universal. And you can easily become Guru at that point. We have seen that in last 2-3 chapters, that when the consciousness is universal, he can understand everybody's bhav, he can understand up to what point he has come, he can understand what he should do next. That is Guru. And it is due to he is the source of all bhavas. So from there he is looking at it. Now he is going towards that divine madness. So he is getting to know much more things than we do. He was in a state of divine madness on account of love of God. In spite of all these, in spite of all these, that means he was pujari, he was doing sadhana, he was mad, and yet he was a guru. You understand? In spite of all these, One who is a spiritual teacher is always so, and one who is a leader is so from childhood. These days in Ramakrishna Mission and everywhere, leadership camps, leadership training goes on. But leader has to have a quality from within. Swami Vivekananda said, Shirdar so Sardar. You know that? Famous quotation of Swamiji. Shirdar so Sardar. One who is ready to sacrifice totally for others, he is only the leader. And so he is telling two things. Guru, leader. And one who is a leader is so from childhood. In Swamiji's stotra made by Harshananji, he tells he is Narendra in every respect. Narendra means king of men, leader of men. Narendra Shaishave, Narendra Yauvane, Narendra, is it not? It is not as if people form a committee, consult one another, and according the position of the spiritual teacher or the leader. In the forest, they say, a lion is there. Nobody has made him sit on a throne and coronated him. Vikrama Arjita Sattvasya Swayam Evam Mrugendrata. He is king. Napi Chacharo, Navisheka Kriyate Jane. Nobody has made any formal appointment, nobody has given him an honor, but he is king. As soon as he appears before society, the minds of people are filled with respect for him. And bowing their heads before him, they immediately begin to learn from him and obey his commands. When Swami Vivekananda was asked in the parliament that you don't have any credentials, then Professor John Wright wrote that to ask Swamiji's credentials is like asking the sun his right to shine. This is the law. Swami Vivekananda said a leader is always born and never made. You can polish his surface a little, that's all. It is therefore seen that the acts which call forth irrevocable punishment from an angry society, when they are committed by ordinary people, make the same society follow them fondly when they are performed by the teachers of people. Krishna was playing with gopis. Somebody else is going to play, people will hit him. Hey, Bhagavan Sri Krishna says in the Gita, people follow whatever a teacher of people sets as the standard by his own action. यद्यद आचरति श्रेष्ठो तत्तदेवेतरो जन स यत् प्रमाणम कुरुते लोकात् तद् अनुवर्तते. Jesus' time, the understanding was that Sunday nobody should do anything. They should fast only. But Jesus asked all his disciples, don't fast, let us eat. No, we don't fast on Sundays. Strange as it may appear, it has all along been a fact and will continue to be so. Let the worship of Indra, said Sri Krishna, be stopped from today, and that of Govardhan be commenced. Indra is the god of rain, so people used to worship Indra for their farm. And Krishna said, our everything depends upon this hill. So why not start worshipping it? And people accepted it. Indra became angry and all that, sent rain, but nothing could happen. People started worshipping Govardhan. And people began to do that. From today, said Buddha, let animal sacrifice be stopped. And immediately society discarded the injection. Yajnarte pasava srishta. Animals have been created to be killed for the purpose of sacrifices. A Vedic sentence. But Buddha said no. People stopped it. You know, this vegetarianism as a habit of people came to India only after Buddha. Till then it was not there. Whether Brahmins or Kshatriyas or anybody in India had no idea that one should not eat meat, even beef. It was Buddha who preached against it. In South India, South means I talk of Tamil Nadu only. Huh? What is the vegetarian food called, do you know? I told one day. Shaiva. Throughout North India, you will see Vaishnava Dhaba. And they ask us, sannyasis, you will eat Shaiva food, na? Because South had a, Tamil Nadu had a sampradaya of Shiva worship. And the Vedic Aryans came from North. And Vedic Aryans were all meat eaters. So to show them separate from that, they coined this Shaiva. We do not eat meat. So strange are the things. So Buddha stopped it. My point was that this non-killing and not eating, all this came after Buddha. Jesus gave permission to his disciples to have their meals on the Sabbath day. That became the rule. Muhammad married many wives, and still people respect and follow him as a religious hero and a selfless teacher. In all things, great or small, that is the case. Whatever they say and do becomes the standard of moral conduct. Previously, kings used to marry many wives. Even great acharyas, Yajnavalkya had two wives. Dasharatha, you know how many wives he had? 353. 353 given in Valmiki Ramayana, of which 3 were men. That's all. And Rama broke it. No. One wife only I will marry. I will never marry second. You know Rama's full story? He had abandoned Sita. And everybody was, and he was udas from that day. So the rishis and everybody said that you must do Ashwamedh Yajna. Then that is the king should do that and your mind also will become all right. No yajna is done without wife. So they were pressing him to marry again. That was the one point which he did not obey the praja. No. Then how will do yajna? Then it was decided that a golden image of Sita was made and kept, and then he performed Ashwamedh. Thakur, we read that Dhani Kamarni, he took Bhiksha from her. The unlimited INS The origin of all consciousness of the phenomenal beings is easily manifested in the spiritual teachers of the world, but it is not so with ordinary people. That is the reason. He had already explained there that when individual I is gone, then only the universal I comes. And in everybody, it is possible in very traces. In avatars, it is fully developed. We already said why that happens. The limited self, the I of the spiritual teachers of people is completely destroyed for all time, and its place is occupied by the universal I, which is the origin of all thoughts and beings. Bhav, thoughts and beings both, is the origin. It is the nature of that I to seek the good of the many. Apparently, how he seeks the good of many? I am all that, so he seeks the good of many. And just as the bees come to know the blossoming of flowers and eagerly desirous of getting honey gather round them, though the flowers do not send a loving invitation to the bees, so as soon as the universal life manifests itself in any person, the afflicted people of the world somehow or other know it and run uninvited to him for peace and bliss. It is with great difficulty and after a good deal of austerities that a drop or two, so to speak, of the manifestation that unlimited I takes place in the ordinary perfected man. Whereas in the lives of the spiritual teachers of the world, there is a manifestation of it from the very beginning of their lives. In youth, there is a greater degree of manifestation. And at last, its fullest manifestation is found in the wonderful acts and deeds, witnessing which men in awe and amazement look upon the spiritual teacher as one with God, when it is fully manifested. That is, will be described in Thakur's Divya Bhav. For the manifestation of that superhuman mood then becomes as natural to them as their common daily actions, like breathing, eating, drinking, and walking. These we do not do with much thinking and deliberation. Like that, it happens to them naturally. What can therefore an ordinary man do? Unable to fathom the depth of their divine nature with his plumb line of selfishness. Plumb line, when you get your word, you should know that. You know plumb line? Hmm? Mechanical engineers or civil engineers to measure the correct verticality, they one thread and little some weight is tied. You have not seen that everywhere? That is called plumb line. Plumb line, that means it stands straight vertical. That means measuring standard. So man's selfishness is his plumb line. And from that he goes to measure, he cannot measure. Poor man, perplexed, what can he do but look upon them as God himself and with absolute reliance and devotion take refuge in them. So this is talking only about the avatars. Ordinary Guru, this says, it comes in them. the time when it became perfectly manifested and natural to the master. So Saradananda Swami is analytical expert. He knows all these things. When it started, when it grew, when it became perfect. When we study the master's life, we also find the gradual unfoldment of this mood daily in his life. When he was in the state of a sadhaka in his youth, and at the end of austere spiritual practices for 12 years, it became fully manifested in him and cast a halo of naturalness around it. At that time, the ordinary human intellect was at a loss to know which eye consciousness the master was in at any particular moment, and when the mood of the spiritual teacher was manifested in him through his identification with the universal eye, when he is individual, when he is universal, difficult to find. But when this mood attained its full development is a distinct story, and it will be told at its proper place. Now it is necessary to tell the reader here a little of how he behaved on many occasions in his youth at the time of his sadhana, when he was beside himself with the divine book. So this para stands as a testimony that the preface was wrong. Graphically as described. So he is going to deal with this now, not with the full. And he had told there, before he appeared before Purple, full. So that is tells in Divya Bhav, fifth volume. That mood at the time of his sadhana in his behavior towards Rani Rasmani and Mathur. Now, who were the people around him at that time? His disciples had not come. Outside sadhakas had not come. He just started doing puja. So, who were the people around him? Hriday came, but he was very jada. So, those who could appreciate was Rani Rasmani and Mathur. So, this chapter will give incident regarding Rani. Next two chapters, Mathur. We find the first manifestation of the mood of spiritual teacher during his youth in connection with Rani Rasmani, the foundress of the Kali temple at Dakshineshwar, and her son-in-law Mathurana. None of us have had the good fortune of seeing either of the two. But from what we have heard from the Master himself, it is very clear that at the very first sight, a love for the Master grew in their hearts, at the very first sight. And gradually it assumed unusual depth. It will perhaps appear to our minds to be a fairy tale instead of a fact that man can love an ordinary man so much and have so much reliance on and devotion to that man. For on superficial observation, the master was then an ordinary, insignificant priest. And they were leaders in society, great in wealth, respect, learning, and intelligence, though not of a high caste. They were both from fishermen caste. But in all other respect, they were leaders. That is why she got the name Rani. The strange nature of the master. What is strange nature? This type of greatness is no greatness for him. If one is nearer God, that is somewhat great. Now the master had a strange nature from a childhood. Wealth, respect, learning, intelligence, big titles and appellations at the end of one's name, because of which people regard one as great, were never held in great regard by him. And these were trained in Nagpur. A man does not become great by the position he holds. He becomes great only by his character. The master used to say when one ascends the monument, Octorloni monument at the Calcutta Maidan. You have seen that? You people should be taken to Maidan once. You have seen? There is a tall building, monument, not residential building. When one ascends the monument, the 3 or 4 storied buildings, the tall trees, and the grass growing low on the ground all look alike. We also find that from his childhood, the master's mind generally dwelt on such a high plane because of his devotion to truth and love of God. 2 things, devotion to truth and love of God. That from there, differences in wealth, respect, learning, etc., on account of which we get puffed up, and the vast earth appears to us to be but a saucer, are not seen. The differences are not seen. These days, money becomes all. Celebrities they become. Cinema actors, cricketers, political leaders. Or the master's mind would always discriminate before undertaking anything and arrive at a definite conclusion by deep thinking so as to why a thing should be done, where the relation with a particular person would ultimately lead, and where it had led others under similar conditions. This was his from his childhood or boyhood. It's a great lesson for us to learn. 3 things he is telling. Before undertaking anything, he used to arrive at a definite conclusion by deep thinking as to why a thing should be done. Where the relation with a particular person would ultimately lead, and where it had led others under similar conditions. So that becomes a useful data. Now, if you say that we cannot have that judgment, will not. This objection will come. We don't have that mind to make a judgment. What shall we do? The thing is that whatever judgment we have, we should apply. And then only our judgment will also improve. If you do not use that faculty of judgment, then it will not grow. Therefore, those things could by no manner of means hide their purpose and final development from him under a charming guise and deflect him from the right course even for a short time. And if it is all right, he will go 200% in it. If it is not all right, he will go away. The reader may say, but this kind of discriminating intellect will bring first of all the defects of all things before the eyes and paralyze all urge for activity and make all undertakings impossible. Dosha darshan will increase. And the whole world will be full of doshas. Then we will be paralyzed, cynic. Everything is bad. It is exactly so. Saradananda Swami agrees, but there is a but. If the intellect were not purified before, our mapkati, plumb line should be improved first. If the intellect were not purified before and freed from desires, that is the main job. Because of desires, the judgment becomes spoiled. And if it were not turned to the high ideal of realization of God, It would undoubtedly render man aimless and inactive, and sometimes self-willed and reckless. When there is nobody is good, then why should I control myself? Whatever I will do, wish I will do, that is self-willed, reckless, no control. If, on the contrary, the intellect is turned to purity and high ideals, it alone probes all things to the very bottom and finds their defects, thereby leading man quickly forward along the path to the realization of God. In Gita, in the 13th chapter, Jnana Lakshanas, Janma Mutyu Jara Vyadhi Dukkha Doshanudarshanam. This word only. That the whole life, human life, is full of defects. If ordinary person looks at it, he will become silly. Then what shall I do? But if your mind is attuned to God, then this is a great help. Therefore, Sri Krishna in the Gita has come there. Has asked only men of such faith and devotion only to find out the painful evils inherent in birth, death, decrepitude and disease, and thereby attain dispassion. Same. Let us observe how well developed was that faculty of finding the hollowness of worldly things in the master's character from his childhood. Example she is giving. Admitted into school, he was not attracted by such titles as Tarkalankar or Vidya Vagish by name and fame, but found out instead that these big Tarka Vagishas and Nyaya Chanchus were dancing attendants at the door of the rich, parading their learning by long quotations from Nyaya and Vedanta for the bundling of rice and plantain, for their mere livelihood. She was not attracted to that. Having got married, he was not at all attracted by worldly pleasures and amusements, but found out instead the evils in committing oneself once for all to worldly life, in order to have an ephemeral, uncertain happiness. Ephemeral means appears happiness only on the surface. And in running after money by increasing one's wants, seeing that everything in the world could be achieved and every position gained by money, he was not thereby induced to devote himself heart and soul to the earning of money. Because he will earn things of the world only, not God. But found out instead that mere rice, pulses, cloth, brick, earth, wood, etc. might be had for money, but not the realization of God. And again, he was not attracted towards acquiring name and fame as a man of charity, a philanthropist, etc., but found out instead that as a result of lifelong efforts, there might be established at the most a few free schools, a few charitable dispensaries, or a few rest houses, and that then would follow death, when the philanthropist would leave the world behind in as much want and joylessness as before. If you create 2, 3 schools or dispensaries, the world will remain as it is. And the same was the spirit manifested regarding everything else. Here, and I am not reading footnotes given by the translators. Here one apologetic footnote is given. I would call it apologetic. Because mission depends upon selfless work. So it is saying he is not criticizing selfless work. It was difficult for the wealthy and the learned to recognize the master, the reason for it. Other side of it. If such was his nature, how the rich will recognize him, how the learned will recognize him. Therefore, it was very, very difficult for ordinary men, especially for the people proud of their learning and wealth. Not only learning and wealth, but proud of learning and wealth. Rani and Mathur had wealth, and Pandits came also, they had a learning, they recognized Thakur. So proud of. To rightly recognize and understand the master who had such a peculiar nature, for as nobody is plain with them, they'll nobody is plain with whom? Rich people and scholars. They lose very often the power of listening to straightforward talks on account of their purse proud nature and the public honor accorded to them. So it is not at all surprising that unable to recognize him, they should take him to be vulgar, mad, or proud. It therefore adds to our surprise to see Rani Rasmani and Mathurana's love and reverence for him. It seems to us that it was a unique stroke of good fortune that by the grace of God, not only did they keep intact their first love for him, but surrendered themselves entirely at his holy feet when they were being daily acquainted with his divine mood as a spiritual teacher. Otherwise, it would not have been easy for Ani Rasmani and Mathur to give up egoism and pride of wealth and contracted love for the master at the first sight and maintain and develop it to the last to a surprising degree. The more so as the master was so queer and old fashioned. For example, he went without food on the day of the dedication ceremony of the Kali temple at Dakshineshwar. Queer. He had his own principles. And later, when he had to stay in the temple, he would day after day rather do his own cooking on the river bank of the provisions supplied from the temple store than partake of the food offered to the Devi, deity, and sanctified by her. All because the cooked food belonged to the low caste people, which, as he thought, would pollute him. That is the reason. Their sanskaras are very bad, low. So if you take food from them, that sanskaras comes. Though his own brother had performed the worship, offered the food and partaken of the prasad, his brother had done all that. Mathur's love and vague admiration for the master led him to seek an opportunity to appoint him as a priest of the Kali temple. But the eccentric master avoided talking with the worldly Mathur. Eccentric for appearance. The latter's repeated attempts notwithstanding. Is it not extraordinary that under such circumstances, the love of Mathur and the Rani went on steadily increasing? The master's condition after his marriage, Mathur's attraction towards him, and others' opinion of him. Discussing three things. The master had by now got married. He was in the heyday of his youth. He had returned to Dakshineshwar after his marriage and had taken charge of the worship of Kali, the Divine Mother. And as soon as he had done so, the divine madness was again upon him. Before that, divine madness was there. Then he went to Kamarpukur. Then that madness had subsided because he had naturalized. Then he was married. And then he came back, started doing puja, again the madness came. And as soon as he had done so, the divine madness was again upon him. In his agony at not having realized God, he rolled on the ground restlessly and rubbed his face mercilessly against it. All these are extreme. You cannot imagine in a man, or as we were telling the other day, in a superman or a saint. Beyond all imagination. We have never seen another man doing like this. Crying piteously all the while, mother, mother. People would gather round him in multitudes and in sympathy would say, the poor man must be suffering from a terrible colic. Colic means stomach pain. Nothing else can make one so restless. So that is people's view. They have never thought anybody out of hankering for God will do like that. And sometimes he became motionless at the time of worship. On placing all the flowers for worship on his own head. And again, sometimes like one mad, he went on singing for a long time the songs composed by sadhakas. At other times, however, when he was somewhat in a normal mood, he behaved with all as he should. But when meditating on the Divine Mother, such ecstasies would come, not once or twice, but very often. Not in small doses, but with overwhelming intensity. Then he would have no consciousness of the surroundings, nor hear anybody's words, nor reply to anybody. But even during those times, people felt very often the exquisite beauty of his divine nature. For even then, if anybody requested him to sing a song or two on the mother, he would begin immediately to sing in his exquisitely sweet voice and filled with the depth of the song, would lose himself in it. Would forget somebody has requested me, I'm singing for somebody. But on somebody's request, he would start and then get lost in the spirit of the song. Now, not only the lower officers, but the cashier, the chief officer of the temple, brought many tales of the master's improper and unceremonious actions to the ears of Rani Rasmani and Mother. It was reported the junior Bhattacharya, what was the junior Bhattacharya? Bhattacharya means Pujari, and his elder brother was the main Pujari. So it is junior Bhattacharya. The master's elder brother was called Senior Bhattacharya. He was then first, therefore known as the Junior Bhattacharya. It was reported the Junior Bhattacharya is ruining everything. The mother's worship and the offering of food to her are not done properly. Can the mother accept anything that is done so improperly? They complained, but the desired effect was not produced. For Mathur Babu used now and then to come suddenly to the temple without informing anybody and remaining unobserved, notice the longing devotional behavior of the master and his affectionate childlike importunities to the Divine Mother during the worship. Shedding tears of joy and devotion, he then ordered the officers of the temple, you shall not obstruct the junior Bhattacharya or find fault with him in anything he may do. You shall inform me first and then act as I order. Rani Rasmani also would come from time to time to the temple and become so charmed with the floral decoration of the mother and with songs of the mother's name and glory sung by the master in the exquisitely sweet voice that whenever she came to the Kali temple, she would call the junior Bhattacharya to her and request him to sing her a few songs. The master also completely forgot that he was singing for any mortal, and filled with the spirit of the songs, went on singing as if he was doing it for the Divine Mother herself. So the request is from somebody, but his mood goes into Divine Mother. Thus days were rolling on. As in the big household of the world, so in the small one in the temple, all were busy with their own affairs, relieving the humdrum monotony of their lives by indulging in such piquant subjects as speaking ill of others and carrying and inventing tales during the little leisure they could snatch. Very common human behavior. From looking after their worldly affairs and thinking about their own selfish interest. Therefore, who was there to notice what changes were being brought about in the mind of the junior Bhattacharya on account of his love of God? He is a mad fellow. The Babus, the proprietors, have somehow taken a fancy to him, and that is why he still retains his job, the job. But how long can he retain it? He is sure to commit some strange act someday and will be driven away. Is there any certainty about the temper of the big folk? It takes very little time to please them or to displease them. This was the kind of talk that sometimes went on among the officers. Uh, the master's nephew and attendant Hriday had joined him then by that time. Okay? So the actual incident has to come. He has brought the background up to that point. Om Sarvadharma Stapakasvam Sarvadharma Swarupaka Acharyana Mahacharyo Ramakrishna Yate Namaha Om Shanti 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 Hari Om Tat Sat Sri Ramakrishna Arpanam.